This is Lauren Giddings, a 27-year-old woman with a bright future ahead. But everything was cruelly cut short on that fateful day. On the 30th of June, 2011, Lauren suddenly went missing, and just half a day later, her body was found in a trash bin, no longer intact. From that moment, a tense and chilling investigation began. Stay with us until the end of the video as we uncover the secrets behind this case. In the quiet town of Macon, Georgia, 27-year-old Lauren Giddings had found a place that felt like home. Originally from Maryland, she moved there in 2008 with the ambition of becoming a public defender. With a calm atmosphere and a community where everyone felt like family, Macon provided the ideal setting for her legal studies at Mercer University School of Law, one of the oldest in the country. Lauren was close to her parents, Karen and Bill, and her two sisters, Sarah and Caitlin. Her loyal dog Butterbean was considered the heart of the family. She was in a long-distance relationship with David Vandiver, a corporate attorney she had met at his law firm in Atlanta. Despite their significant age difference, their bond was strong, built on mutual respect, humor, and shared ambition. Although the separation caused a temporary breakup, Lauren eventually ended a brief relationship with another student, Joe, and reaffirmed her commitment to David. By June 2011, Lauren had successfully completed her law degree. Butterbean, her family, and David were present for her graduation, a moment of celebration and pride. Shortly after, she returned to Maryland for her sister Caitlin's wedding, aware that it might be the last time they would all be together for some time. With graduation behind her, Lauren turned her focus toward preparing for the Georgia bar exam, dedicating every spare hour to studying, determined to take the next step in her legal career, unaware of how abruptly that future would be taken from her. Following graduation, Lauren chose to remain in Macon rather than return to Baltimore. She stayed on the second floor of Bars Hall, a residence designated for law students located just across from Mercer's campus. The convenience of staying near the library and faculty while preparing for the bar exam made it a sensible decision. But her peaceful apartment soon started to feel unsettling. Lauren had confided in her sister about something she couldn't explain. She felt that items in her apartment were being moved, and that someone might be entering while she was away. Even though there were no signs of forced entry, the atmosphere felt strange, as though someone was watching her. On the 25th of June, 2011, late at night, she emailed David expressing these concerns. He downplayed them, suggesting she might be overworked and imagining things, or that it could be harmless people outside causing some unease. Lauren then sent out a message to her friends, letting them know she'd be less responsive as she focused on studying. Over the following days, she went mostly silent. This wasn't initially concerning. She had warned them and was known to be absorbed in studying. Other than attending church or the gym occasionally, she kept to herself. Still, her best friend Katie and sister Caitlin noticed the silence felt off. Caitlin, who was on her honeymoon, had been sending photos and was surprised by the lack of any response. Growing worried, Caitlin contacted another student, Ashley, and asked her to check on Lauren. Ashley called first, but Lauren's phone went straight to voicemail. Arriving at the apartment with her boyfriend, Ashley noticed Lauren's car still outside. Using a spare key, they entered and found the apartment slightly messy, initially assumed to be related to an upcoming move with David. But when they checked her calendar and realized the move-out date had already passed, concern turned into dread. On the 30th of June, Lauren's purse, law books, phone, and laptop were found inside her apartment, items she would never have left behind under normal circumstances. Concern escalated rapidly. Ashley contacted others in the building, and even Lauren's ex-boyfriend Joe began checking around the university. The last confirmed time anyone had seen Lauren was 4 days earlier at a year-end party. She had left the following morning in good spirits, and that same day, she had emailed David to express her unease about the apartment. When no one had any further contact, the decision was made to involve the police. Meanwhile, her family began the nearly 12-hour drive from Maryland to Georgia to assist in the search. At 9 a.m., officers arrived at her unit in Bars Hall. The scene appeared undisturbed, no forced entry, no signs of a struggle, and nothing missing. But the atmosphere was heavy, with the sense that something wasn't right. Investigators began checking the space more thoroughly and applied luminol to detect traces of blood. The apartment appeared clean until they reached the bathroom. The chemical revealed strong evidence that the bathtub had once contained a large volume of blood. Investigators now feared they were no longer searching for a missing person, but for a body. It was a hot, windy day, and as they regrouped outside, a sudden gust carried a putrid odor in their direction. The officers were near the garbage bins when the smell stopped them cold. It was unmistakably the scent of decomposition. Upon opening the lids, they uncovered a horrifying sight: a woman's torso wrapped in a black trash bag. Though forensic tests were pending, the evidence already collected pointed overwhelmingly to the conclusion that it belonged to Lauren. Investigators were shaken. Whoever was responsible, they believed, had committed an act of inhuman brutality. In a strange twist of fate, the police vehicles blocking the entrance had inadvertently prevented the trash collection truck from entering. Had the bins been emptied earlier as scheduled, critical evidence might have been lost forever. As feared, testing confirmed that the torso found belonged to Lauren Giddings. The chief medical examiner reported there were no signs of sexual assault, but the cause of death couldn't be determined. Investigators believe she may have been killed, and the perpetrator carried out actions that left her body no longer intact. Lauren's apartment, especially the bathroom, was now under intense forensic review. Despite thorough cleaning, luminol revealed traces of blood, but few fingerprints or physical clues remained. Authorities decided to keep the discovery under wraps for now, suspecting the perpetrator could still be in the complex. Alerting them too soon might drive them to flee or destroy further evidence. One detective explained their approach. When investigating, you first look at those closest, either emotionally or physically. Friends like Ashley and Joe, who had initially joined the search, were asked to give official statements. Lauren's boyfriend David was also questioned, but he had a solid alibi. He had been away on a golfing trip in California, and his story checked out. He was visibly heartbroken and clearly uninvolved. Joe, the ex-boyfriend, was also quickly ruled out. Authorities sought to search every apartment in the building to eliminate suspects. Most residents agreed without hesitation, except one. 25-year-old Stephen McDaniel declined. He explained his resistance by saying, "It's just the lawyer in me. I'm protective of my space." Stephen, a fellow law student preparing for the bar, had lived next door to Lauren since their first year. He had even participated in the initial search effort. But during his early interview, something felt off. Asked when he had last seen Lauren, he vaguely mentioned seeing her running a week or so earlier. Beyond that, he offered no insight, claiming they had searched but found nothing to suggest where she might be. His demeanor raised quiet alarms. As the investigation continued across the apartment complex, detectives kept a close eye on Stephen McDaniel, whose behavior raised increasing concern. He refused to contribute meaningfully to the search but remained present throughout, observing every move the authorities made. He followed officers around as they entered neighboring units, staying unusually close to the action without offering any real help. His presence became even more suspicious when he quickly approached members of the media, positioning himself as an informed and concerned neighbor. Stephen presented theories about Lauren's disappearance, claiming she hadn't been seen since the previous weekend. He vaguely referenced an email she had sent shortly before going missing and offered general comments about her character. Although he mentioned that her apartment door had been locked and there were no signs of forced entry, his observations were oddly impersonal. He recalled that some friends with a spare key had entered her apartment to search for clues, but no one found anything unusual. Despite acting uninvolved in official matters, Stephen appeared to know more than he admitted. When reporters brought up the possibility of a body being found in a nearby dumpster, his reaction was tense and uncertain. He seemed aware of something significant, even though only a few people at the time knew about the torso that had been discovered. After his media interview ended, he sat alone for a long time, silently staring into the distance. Later, a friend of Lauren's revealed an email she had sent the night she vanished, expressing fear about a possible break-in at her apartment days earlier. Stephen had read this message but never mentioned it to investigators, claiming he hadn't known about any unusual events that Thursday night. The fact that he possessed such sensitive information and failed to report it added another layer of suspicion. Stephen's passive involvement, strange demeanor, and selective recollection made him stand out among others. While friends and neighbors searched desperately for Lauren, he maintained a quiet, eerie presence, present at every moment, but never truly helpful. The inconsistencies in his story and his emotional detachment began to form a troubling pattern that investigators could no longer ignore. A few hours later, he finally allowed the officers into his apartment. What they found inside raised even more suspicions. Shelves lined with energy drinks, piles of non-perishable food, and an unsettling number of unusual objects, including various types of weaponry. As they examined his drawers, they came across a pack of condoms. When questioned, he awkwardly claimed he was saving himself for marriage and mentioned using a dating site, but said he hadn't been successful in finding anyone. His behavior was erratic, and when asked again about the condoms, he gave an implausible story about stealing them from nearby apartments. His casual admission of breaking into neighboring homes stunned the officers, especially since those apartments were just steps away from where Lauren had lived. With this, they had enough to charge him with burglary, and he was taken into custody for further interrogation. Meanwhile, a K-9 unit from a nearby county joined the investigation, assisting with the search for Lauren's remains. Despite Stephen being held on unrelated charges, police continued interviewing neighbors and students, determined to uncover the truth. But with no formal charges tied to Lauren's disappearance, everything remained uncertain. For now, what disturbed investigators further was the sudden shift in his demeanor. Once eager to speak with the media and stay informed about every detail of the case, Stephen had now gone completely silent. During questioning, he offered nothing but short, vague responses. He confirmed Lauren lived next door and admitted they had been friends, but when pressed for details, he offered only a cold, "I don't know." His lack of emotion, especially when told a woman's body had been found nearby, left detectives uneasy. Despite being told that the remains likely belonged to Lauren, Stephen showed little reaction. He didn't ask questions, didn't express concern, just repeated that he didn't know. Officers pushed harder, reminding him that Lauren's family deserved answers. Still, he remained blank, giving no insight, no closure. The burden of truth hovered in the room, but Stephen refused to lift it, leaving only deeper questions and a growing sense that something far more disturbing was hiding just beneath the surface. During his interrogation, Stephen's behavior struck detectives as profoundly abnormal. He remained almost entirely motionless for hours, his posture rigid, his eyes fixed straight ahead, and his body language nearly devoid of any emotion. The only movement came when officers explicitly prompted him to respond. And even then, his answers were short and robotic. Surveillance footage from the room, when played at higher speed, revealed just how unnaturally still he was, especially when compared to the natural pacing and gestures of the detectives around him. His limited verbal responses, mostly reduced to short phrases like "no" or "I don't know," created mounting frustration for Detective Patterson, who was convinced Stephen held the key to what had happened to Lauren. The contrast between Stephen's earlier eagerness to appear in front of news cameras and his current uncooperative stance in the interview room only intensified suspicion. The officer tried various approaches, ranging from calm reasoning to emotional pressure, in an attempt to break through the wall of silence. But Stephen remained steadfast. As the hours passed into the early morning, the detectives grew increasingly desperate. They highlighted the weight of the situation, the pain Lauren's family was enduring, and even pointed to evidence like the discovery of a body near his apartment and potential DNA findings. Still, Stephen offered no meaningful cooperation. His apparent detachment, both emotionally and physically, only deepened their concern. Toward the end of the session, investigators observed and documented 2 small scratches located just above Stephen's hip. Though he gave no explanation for them, the detail was noted carefully. The interview had yielded few concrete answers, but everything from his behavior to his minimal speech continued to suggest a dark truth he wasn't ready to admit. As detectives pressed Stephen for answers, the parallel search of his apartment revealed shocking evidence. Hidden among his belongings was a master key that granted access to every unit in the building, a deeply alarming find. In his drawers, Officers located a hacksaw's packaging, a set of flash drives later found containing inappropriate content related to children, and an item of clothing that, once tested, proved to belong to Lauren. These discoveries drastically shifted the tone of the investigation. His digital footprint was just as disturbing. Investigators uncovered a pattern of obsessive online behavior, frequent visits to Lauren's social media pages, overlapping with searches for violent, explicit content. He had even published dark writings online, fantasizing about acts of torture and cruelty toward women. One of his final searches was particularly telling: the trash collection schedule for the complex. Back at the station, officers confronted Stephen with what they had found. His detached expression didn't change, but they were now convinced beyond doubt. Their theory was further confirmed when, in a maintenance room within the building, they discovered a hacksaw with traces of blood, alongside a blood-stained bedsheet, both linked to Lauren. CCTV had earlier captured Stephen purchasing a hacksaw matching the recovered one. The maintenance staff had already been cleared, and Stephen was the only resident with access to the locked space. Every thread led to a single conclusion. Stephen McDaniel, once a promising law student and quiet neighbor, had been hiding an obsession so twisted it ultimately led to murder. What remained was the chilling question: why? Stephen's classmates described him as uneasy to be around, socially awkward and prone to making others uncomfortable. He often brought up morbid topics like zombie apocalypses and perfect ways to commit murder. Some recalled how he asked disturbing hypothetical questions about how to kill someone and cover it up. Despite being voted most likely to be famous, his arrogance set him apart. He loved debating, often insisting he was right, even when clearly wrong. He frequently clashed with Lauren and others, preferring confrontation to connection. Most described him as an average student with an inflated sense of superiority. As graduation approached, Stephen had no real friends or plans, drifting aimlessly. Since 2008, when he first moved next to Lauren, she had tried to be kind and supportive. She even introduced him to her mother, Karen, who later recalled sensing something odd about him. Karen noted how his windows were always shut, making it easy to forget someone lived next door. Though Lauren tried to be polite, she too felt uneasy around him. In an old email to David, she mentioned his classroom behavior and called him someone who had it out for her. Stephen, however, had become fixated, asking her out on multiple occasions. She always declined, citing her relationship and lack of interest, and began keeping a safe distance. With mounting evidence, Stephen McDaniel was formally charged with Lauren's murder on the 2nd of August, 2011. He was later convicted of 7 additional charges for engaging in inappropriate conduct involving children. Despite his defense pushing for a $100,000 bail, the court set it at nearly $1 million. A grand jury ultimately indicted Stephen McDaniel for the murder of Lauren Giddings, along with 30 charges related to inappropriate conduct involving children. This decision came after extensive digital analysis of his electronic devices. The prosecution now had a stronger foundation to move forward. Jurors concluded there was enough probable cause to formally advance the case. The official accusation stated that Stephen had killed Lauren in a violent manner, including dismemberment, although the exact details remained unclear. While the case was building steadily, it was still largely circumstantial. Stephen's DNA was not discovered in Lauren's apartment or on the saw believed to be used in the crime. The one physical item connecting him to her, an undergarment, could potentially be explained away as theft, which he had admitted to in other instances. There remained no definitive time or cause of death, which added further complexity. However, an unexpected piece of digital evidence was uncovered, one that dramatically altered the course of the investigation. A memory card seized from Stephen's apartment contained video footage, clearly showing he had been spying on Lauren. On the very night she disappeared, he had recorded her apartment using a pole rigged with a small camera, capturing footage through her closed blinds. This disturbing discovery confirmed that Lauren's unease and belief that someone was watching her were completely justified. For the lead prosecutor, it was the moment that erased all doubt. Stephen had not only been obsessed, he had been planning and watching, right until the moment everything changed. A few days after the grim discovery, a large crowd gathered at St. Mary of the Mills Church for Lauren's funeral. Sadly, only her torso had been recovered, and that was all that could be laid to rest. Soon after, the Bibb County District Attorney's Office announced its intention to seek the death penalty against Stephen McDaniel. He entered a plea of not guilty, and the defense planned to argue that police had manipulated the evidence and planted items in his apartment. In an unexpected twist, one of McDaniel's defense attorneys had previously taught Lauren in a transitional legal course. He remembered her as an exceptional student who strongly opposed the death penalty. With that in mind, he advocated against seeking the maximum sentence on her behalf. Meanwhile, the prosecution and defense prepared for a difficult trial. Eventually, the prosecution dropped the child exploitation charges in exchange for a guilty plea. In April 2014, just days before the trial was due to begin, Stephen McDaniel admitted to killing Lauren Giddings and to actions that left her body no longer intact. As part of the plea deal, he was required to submit an allocution, providing a written confession detailing exactly what had taken place. The confession answered two agonizing questions that had haunted Lauren's family for years. What exactly happened the night she died, and where the rest of her remains had gone? With the allocution, McDaniel could no longer deny his role, and the deal ensured he would never walk free again. One of his former attorneys later revealed that the computer evidence was the turning point. It had piled up steadily until the weight of it made a trial too risky. Before the sentencing could proceed, the prosecution introduced disturbing material that aimed to illustrate the defendant's mindset. A video of Lauren's apartment was shown, followed by a forum post allegedly linked to Stephen. The post painted a graphic fantasy involving an intoxicated woman, a staged romantic encounter, and an unthinkable act involving her remains. Though some dismissed the post as an example of internet trolling, prosecutors remained convinced it reflected Stephen's own words. Still, the debate over its authenticity lingers in the shadows of the case, just as chilling as the confession he was about to make in court. As part of his plea deal, Stephen was required to recount the events of that day. In his statement, he admitted to entering Lauren's apartment around 4:30 in the morning using a master key. He wore black clothing, gloves, and a mask. Once inside, he stood watching her sleep, but she stirred awake, sensing something was off. Before she could react, he lunged at her. The two struggled and tumbled from the bed. In the chaos, she managed to rip off his mask, recognized him, and cried out his name. He recounted that she pleaded and fought for nearly 15 minutes as he continued his assault. Eventually, she stopped breathing. He then moved her to the bathroom and left her body in the tub for the entire day. That evening, on the 27th of June, he returned with tools, including a hacksaw, and carried out actions that were too disturbing to be repeated. The level of detail he provided shocked even seasoned investigators, yet it was part of the plea process he had agreed to. He admitted to placing parts of her remains into separate trash bags, discarding them in various dumpsters around the university area. However, he chose to leave the torso in the container nearest the apartment building, under the assumption that it would be collected quickly. In an attempt to destroy evidence, he cut up his clothing, gloves, and mask, then flushed the pieces down the toilet. What remained was a trail of calculated cruelty and a haunting silence where answers should have been. The medical examiner found no evidence of sexual assault, and Stephen maintained that he had not violated Lauren. He stated she had been wearing pink running shorts when she died and claimed he never removed them. They were found intact on her torso. Even after nearly 3 years, those who knew Lauren struggled to comprehend how such a kind person could meet such a fate. Stephen himself admitted that she had only ever treated him with kindness. Stephen McDaniel claimed that his actions stemmed from a detached, dreamlike mental state. He admitted that, for a period of time following the crime, he convinced himself that Lauren was still alive. In court, he acknowledged the gravity of his actions, but said he could not fully explain why he committed them or attempted to conceal what he had done. He insisted that he was not devoid of morals or reason, and suggested that some aspect of his psychological or neurological makeup might account for his behavior. He expressed deep remorse, stating that he mourned Lauren every day, Yet he made it clear he did not expect her family to forgive him, as he believed he was unworthy of it. The prosecution ultimately did not pursue the death penalty, respecting Lauren's opposition to it. Her family honored her stance and expressed hope that Stephen would live out a long life in prison under the harshest possible conditions. He was sentenced to life in prison with no eligibility for parole until 2041. After sentencing, Stephen sent a handwritten letter from prison claiming the investigation had been unfair. He accused police of intimidation during the interrogation and said they denied him medical help unless he agreed to a search of his apartment. He claimed he suffered a seizure from stress during questioning. 4 years later, he filed an appeal, representing himself, and summoned more than 10 individuals for interviews, including his former attorney, seeking damages. The case gained momentum later that afternoon when Stephen McDaniel chose to waive attorney-client privilege, allowing his former lawyer, Floyd Buford, to speak freely about their past conversations. Buford openly discussed McDaniel's confession, which included graphic and disturbing details made while he was in jail. Combined with his disturbing internet search history, such as looking up necrophilia and his possession of highly disturbing child exploitation images, Buford stated the evidence was overwhelmingly damaging. Despite this, McDaniel filed a habeas corpus petition, claiming Buford and the rest of his defense team failed to represent him effectively. In his complaint, he demanded $50,000 for legal fees and an additional $250,000 in punitive damages for what he alleged was negligence. He also filed a motion against Judge Howard Sims, accusing the judge of bias. This appeal was denied. In 2022, McDaniel tried again, claiming prosecutors stole documents, violated his rights, and that his attorneys were incompetent. He asked the court to overturn his conviction and release him. His father, Mark, supported him, stating their only hope was for the truth to come out. But the judge dismissed the appeal, noting it was filed more than a year late and could not be considered. Still, McDaniel has since filed another appeal, which remains under review. Despite the overwhelming evidence, some of Stephen McDaniel's family and acquaintances continued to believe in his innocence. His father launched a GoFundMe campaign to raise legal funds, but it attracted no donations and was quickly taken down. Lauren's sister Caitlin called the effort both delusional and pathetic. Before his passing, Stephen's grandfather Hollis gave an interview recalling a jail visit, describing Stephen as distant and unresponsive. Hollis said he initially hoped bail could be posted quickly, but the moment he saw Stephen, he knew something was off. His mother, Glenda, insisted her son was innocent and even imagined a future where he might serve on the Supreme Court. For the authorities and Lauren's family, however, the matter had long been settled. Caitlin reflected that Lauren had shown kindness to someone many others avoided, and that this tragedy wasn't about being careless, it was about being too compassionate. She emphasized that kindness shouldn't come with a warning label, but in this case, it had deadly consequences. Detectives believed they had stopped a potential serial offender who posed a danger not only to women but also to children. Once voted most likely to become famous, Stephen had instead become infamous for one of the most disturbing crimes the community had ever faced. Investigators credited Lauren's loved ones for acting swiftly and noted that if trash collection had gone as scheduled, crucial evidence might have disappeared, and Stephen may never have been caught. Detective David Paterson concluded that Stephen had never been fully honest, and that some truths would likely remain buried forever. Lauren's presence continued to be deeply felt by those who loved her, even in her absence. Her family marked every milestone and life event as if she were still part of them, honoring her memory in both subtle and profound ways. Annual runs were held in her name, and her sister Caitlin chose to name her daughter Lauren Magnolia as a tribute. Across Mercer, 2 plaques were dedicated to her legacy, one at Mercer Law School and another on a pink bench in Washington Park, a place where Lauren had loved to run. Her brief time training at a local law firm led to the establishment of the Lauren Teresa Giddings Scholarship, providing support to aspiring legal minds who shared her drive. Known for her love of bright colors, especially pink, Lauren had stood out in the traditionally monochrome world of law. Her vibrant style became more than a personal preference. It was a statement of courage, energy, and individuality. Her friends often said she reminded them of Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, unafraid to shine in a world that preferred black pinstripes. To many, that bright pink was more than a fashion choice. It was Lauren's way of embracing challenges with positivity and determination. She was a driven, ambitious young woman who had been ready to take on the world with warmth and intelligence. Those closest to her agreed that she had never truly left. Her presence remained, woven into their daily lives. Though her loss left a permanent void, her legacy endured, unapologetically vibrant, impossible to ignore, and deeply loved.